Hi, my name is Sakine Majd. I'm the founder of Tax Formations, which is a tax consulting firm specializing in tax and transaction and entity structuring. Today's video is a very high level description of how you go about determining that the taxation of a foreign entity owned by a US shareholder. Now, most of the time, I deal with this question in the reverse. What is the taxation of a U.S. entity owned by a foreign shareholder? And I can cover that one in a different video. But let's move forward with this question. And as we discuss this, I will be referring to a case study from a recent client that I worked with. So, the first step in determining the taxation of a foreign entity with a U.S. owner is you have to determine, is that foreign entity subject to US tax? And if so, how much? So you do this using the sourcing rules. In my particular case study, this entity earns income through providing services. Services are sourced according to the location of the service provider. Because this entity is owned by one person who lives in the United States and provides all the services. 100% of the income is US source, and 100% of this foreign entity's income was subject to tax in the US. There's the answer in the US. Next, you go to the foreign jurisdiction. Now, in this foreign jurisdiction, he created an LLC. But an LLC in that foreign jurisdiction is treated like a corporation in the United States. What this means is that it has to file its own separate tax return each year and pay 19% corporate tax no matter what. So now we have a problem. This entity is fully subject to tax in both the United States and the foreign jurisdiction. What do? Here comes the third step to an international taxation analysis. We look to see if there's a treaty between the United States and the foreign jurisdiction. If there is, which most of the time there is, we look to the treaty to tell us what to do in a double taxation situation. Because there is not a jurisdiction in the world that wants you to have to pay double taxation. It's just wrong. It should never happen. In fact, the reason that international tax treaties are created between the United States and foreign jurisdictions is for the purpose of the avoidance of double taxation. So I then looked to the treaty between the foreign jurisdiction and the United States to look to see what it says for how you figure out a double taxation question. Now, international tax treaties between the United States and other jurisdictions are often very similar. Many of them reference the concept of permanent establishment, and this treaty also did. What this treaty said regarding double taxation is if an entity is subject to tax in both the United States and a foreign jurisdiction, that entity will be subject to tax in the jurisdiction where it has permanent establishment. To the extent the entity has permanent establishment in the US and the foreign jurisdiction, the income from the entity will be allocated to the two jurisdictions according to the percentage of permanent establishment in each jurisdiction, resulting in the entity only paying tax on 100% of its income and the double taxation problem being resolved. So permanent establishment has very similar definitions across tax treaties with the United States, sometimes the exact same definition as in other countries. Generally, a permanent establishment is a fixed place of business, something tangible. You can create permanent establishment generally through having employees located in the jurisdiction, tangible offices, tangible physical property, things like that. But you can also create permanent establishment oftentimes by having an employee with the authority to sign contracts in the jurisdiction. So it's not always about something tangible, but it's really, the definition is a fixed place of business. So, in this case study example, the taxpayer actually had permanent establishment in the United States based on his authority to conclude contracts in the United States. And there was no permanent establishment in the foreign jurisdiction because they had no physical offices, no physical inventory, no employees with strong ownership type powers like to conclude contracts. And therefore the final answer was not subject to tax in the foreign jurisdiction at all, 100% subject to tax in the United States, which is interesting because it's a foreign entity, not a US entity. But it was all about the fact that they provide services from the United States and they earn income through providing services. As far as the tax filing responsibilities in the foreign jurisdiction, the LLC has to file essentially a corporate return each year and report everything, just complete the entire return. And then at the end, report its exemption by referencing the article of the international treaty that says for the avoidance of double taxation. That basically concludes they're not subject to tax. And at the end of the day, they'd be filing a zero tax return in the foreign jurisdiction each year. In the United States, interestingly enough, this LLC is treated as an LLC, which is a disregarded entity, and income and loss flow through automatically to the taxpayer as the sole owner. So no additional tax filing responsibilities whatsoever in the United States. So it's funny how it turned out. We have to file taxes in the foreign jurisdiction, but we pay them in the United States.